All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Evernest Real Estate Investor Podcast. I am the main host of this podcast, Spencer Sutton.
He's really escalated there.
I've got a couple of rookies joining me. I've got Matthew Whitaker and Gray Hall. Guys, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to my show.
We are so excited to be here, Spencer. We appreciate you letting us get back on this thing.
Yeah, it's what an honor to be here with the Spencer Sutton. I mean, just to grace us with your presence, we appreciate it.
Everybody knows I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that again because I want y'all to come back. No, guys, welcome back to the show. This is we're going to talk about something that we have tons of experience with, and today we're going to be talking about
which is like different from anything else we've talked about today. So what we're saying is, forget about anything we've told you.
We don't know what we're talking about.
Get into an area where we know something.
If you could just pick one episode, this is the episode. No, I'm kidding. We're going to talk about, this is a topic, Matthew, like this is where you cut your teeth. Like you cut your teeth in these areas.
This is it. This is where a boy became a man. And today I'm really pumped that we're going to talk about our hometown, yours and mine, Spencer, and Gray's original hometown, Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah, Gray, you can't act like you're some big Denver guy now. You're from Birmingham, so don't ever forget that.
I've embraced it. I got the Colorado license plate. I'm not getting hated on for having an out-of-state license plate.
Well, the thing about Birmingham is it seems like it's on every investor's hot list. I'll look on LinkedIn or look at some data that comes out, and it seems like Birmingham, like we are like headquartered in the hotbed of rental investing. So today we're going to hit on some cool areas to invest. And, this is where we started Evernest Property Management. And so we have obviously a lot of experience here, and going to try to see if we can help some people figure out the best places to invest here in Birmingham.
Yeah, Matthew, you and I have done a kind of a broad overview of Birmingham before on this show. So now we want to get into more specific areas. And so what we thought we'd do is just give, what we're seeing in the market here in Birmingham in 2022, give some insight into some great areas to invest, whether you're looking for B class, C class, and there may be some of you out there who want to dip your toe into some D to C minus class neighborhoods.
And since Gray has never owned a house here in Birmingham, and he's been a tenant, so we can get the tenant side from Gray Hall.
We'll get that. We'll get
We're
the
glad to
updated
have
report.
you here.
We can get Duncan involved. Duncan was like a resident of ours. Like we managed his property when he came to work here 7 years ago.
That's right. Our Atlanta team leader is a former resident.
That's what we're here to bring, just multiple perspectives to help our investors know where to invest. And so
exactly,
got the two old guys talking about how Birmingham used to be, and I'll give you all the updated info on what it's really like.
Easy. I look forward to that. That's great.
3 generations of Evernesters here.
Yeah.
All right. So let's kick it off with some B class. What are Gray? I'm going to talk to you. What are some B class areas of Birmingham that you have seen here lately that investors are super interested in, great places to invest? What would you say?
So if you're looking at the map, if you kind of go south of the city, and that's tend to be kind of where a lot of the B class areas are, just kind of outside of the city center. So, a lot of investors really kind of like this Pelham, Alabaster, Calera kind of corridor. So if you follow I-65, it kind of runs down there. Pelham's got really good school systems. So I think that's kind of a positive for living there. Tend to be kind of more homeowners compared to C class, but I mean, really good properties. And as you talk about kind of like getting out of the city, I mean, they had to be built relatively recent, like new. And so I think in Calera, you definitely get that. It's a little bit further out. And so there are, a lot of post 2000 built houses. What that typically means is, typically lower maintenance. They were designed with modern amenities. And then, Pelham and Alabaster have some older vintage house, maybe the 60s and 70s, but you don't really have any kind of 20s houses out here. And so, typical kind of a lot of 3.2s, opposed to some of the other C-class areas having a lot of 3.1s. Really kind of good solid areas. I mean, a lot higher kind of rents than some of the C areas, but you can still find some pretty decent rent to price ratios out in these areas. They're good kind of developing areas. They've, even from 10 years ago, I've kind of filled out just as the city has kind of grown. And so, those are 3 areas I hear a lot of investors looking at. And I think the other thing to note is it's competitive. If you got more homeowners, I know Calera I've seen the prices kind of really increase. And so look great if you own properties there, but can't get the same returns you got 5 years ago. And so that's just kind of another thing that I've seen recently is just, more competition just in people bidding houses up.
Yeah, when I think of Alabaster and Pelham, because they're very close to each other, I just think of 70s type houses. I think a little bit bigger than the houses in Calera. When I think of Calera, I think more brick garden home type houses. That's what we've seen a lot of investors buy, are those very efficient garden home brick houses. But the Pelham and Alabaster houses are a little bit bigger. From what I know. Matthew, anything
Spencer,
to add here?
Yeah, I would just love to hear from you some stories of what it was like down in Pelham and Alabaster when they were building these houses back in the 60s and 70s. Can you recall any of those stories?
Listen, I grew up in this area called Mountain Brook, and I remember dating a girl way down like 65 area, and there was nothing built down there. Like my mom had to tell me where to go and pick her up. I was like, I have never been out of this place. Like it was.
You were probably a little nervous.
Well, I was definitely nervous, and I went down
going
highway
out in the country.
I went down Highway 280, more where Gray grew up, and there was literally nothing but a Lloyd's restaurant and a tackle shop. So
2-lane road and Lloyd's restaurant.
That's right.
No, look, my wife actually grew up down there as well. And that area has grown up, in the last 30 or 40 years. That area continues to have houses being built that go to, all of those school systems, whether you're talking about Calera, Alabaster, Pelham. You can even creep back up as you come north into Hoover and get into some really great B-class homes. And these houses are typically like either split level homes. They're either split level or 2-story homes. They're bigger houses. A lot of them have garages. But listen, these houses rent great. And there's a lot of people that move there, like y'all said, specifically for the school system. It has like all the commercial stuff you would expect around there. And
it's
just
not
really
far out of the city. It's not far from the city if people work downtown.
Somebody could literally live live there and travel to downtown Birmingham and be there in 25-30 minutes. So it's not a big deal. I mean, if you get down into Calera, you're talking about more like 45 minutes.
Yep.
And that's where like you said, the newer housing stock is. But I mean, if you can find a rental home in these areas, all day, I would buy there all day.
Yeah.
Like, incredible areas.
And you see a little bit in some parts of Alabaster, just a little bit more land. Calera is going to have kind of houses close together. Like another area right by kind of Pelham is Helena. And that's where most of that stuff is going to be 95 and newer, but that's going to be smaller lots, kind of some more of the efficient home. And then you've got some, nice big houses in here that get up in the 400s that are pretty big houses, but you've got some newer kind of neighborhoods and there's stuff built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And those are, really good rental homes. And, it's going to be that kind of 13 to 2,000 square foot. And you can find a lot of kind of 3.2s, even 4.2s down there.
What do they rent for?
Down there, I haven't looked when I was looking earlier. It was probably in the 15s to 1700s.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, and rental rates have increased, and so I think somewhere in that ballpark.
All right, good. That's our first area, our first grouping of properties, B class neighborhoods. Let's move on to kind of the I would say the sweet spot for a lot of rental investors who come to Birmingham are the C class areas that we think are really hot right now. So, Gray, what are your thoughts here?
Birmingham's got, I think one of the reasons that it shows up on, best places to invest. I think we've got a pretty high number just inventory wise of C class homes. And so, I think you kind of look at the map and you can listen to the other episode where we give the overview. A lot of these are kind of closer to the city center than Alabaster and Pelham, but a little bit outside of that. One of the kind of main areas that a lot of investors look to, and it's still a great place to buy, is kind of like the Roebuck, Grayson Valley, not necessarily Center Point, but that kind of Center Point area. The zip codes are 35215 and 35235. And what a lot of people think of just rental investing, this is probably what they have in their mind. A 3-1, 3-1.5, 3-2, maybe a split level home or ranch style. But a lot of good inventory in there, and you're going to see better, yields than you are in the B class. A lot of these houses are going to be right now in the 110 to 160 range. And you're able to kind of get rents in the 12 to 13, maybe even up into the 1500s. That's kind of where it tops out for that area. And so kind of you got 45s up to, probably 80s. There's not as much new build out there, but that's kind of the vintage of the house that you're looking for in those kind of Roebuck and Grayson Valley areres.
I had an awesome rental house in Clay Chalkville, which is just north of Grayson Valley. And we had a tenant, Evernest placed a tenant in there, and she stayed for 10 years. Like, it was a great experience. I mean, that's what you want.
Happy Evernest client right there.
That's right.
I have owned hundreds of these houses, and we have managed probably thousands of these houses. This is certainly a sweet spot for investing. And look, I love these houses because they do have some modern amenities, and obviously they're built for central heating and air. They've got closets. They have low ceilings, so they're easy to heat and cool. They're 8-foot ceilings. They've got dining rooms and living rooms, and look, they're just they're great homes. And we love like super efficient homes because when you go to paint them, it's easy to paint them. When you go to replace the flooring in areas, it's really efficient. So you can do that pretty easily. And, one of the cool things about Birmingham is because it's so hilly here, and that actually surprises a lot of people, you can almost tell the vintage home based on like if it's flat. So a lot of this area, northeast, northwest, is very flat. So Birmingham spread out northeast and northwest first. And then south of town, we call it like over the mountain is what we call it here locally. It's more hilly. So that's the newer homes south of town. And so, there's literally like the Appalachian Mountain Range. And anybody that's from a mountainous region is going to say those aren't mountains, but the Appalachian Mountains literally start about a couple football fields from where I'm sitting. And as you go south, you get into newer homes and kind of traditional suburbs. But as you go northeast, north, and northwest, you get into these houses, these communities that were started in kind of the late 40s, building up through the 50s, through the 60s. And as you go out, it's almost like a tree. You can get layers of the next homes built. And so, but like when people come and visit with us and we drive them around Birmingham, it's kind of fun to take them out and show them, all right, this is, and the rents will continue to climb as you get further and further out. Now, if you get too far out, then it becomes a problem. But it's traditionally speaking, that's kind of the lay of the land in Birmingham.
So let me ask you, Matthew, like looking at the map, I know you've owned a lot of houses in Center Point. We've bought and sold a whole bunch. We've managed a whole bunch. Like, how far north are you going? Like northeast, are you going up past Grayson Valley up to Clay, further than Clay,
Pinson?
Okay,
Shoot,
Pinson,
Pinson.
Yeah. Pinson's great.
There's you can even go east to places like Margaret. There's a lot of build to rent, or not a lot, but I know there's some build to rent in Margaret. Like there's some areas. What I would say is 30 miles, maybe 35 miles from the city center, and you're going to get, as long as you're buying within that that kind of range, you're going to be able to get a consistent product, and people are willing to drive in. I mean, traffic doesn't even pick up till you get to like Trussville.
Yeah. Maybe, Woodhaven, maybe, and kind of Rimlap, it just gets to start being pretty rural out there. And the reason we say it might be a problem is just less demand. So you're gonna have to build in higher vacancy if you're planning to buy out there. Just not as many people kind of live out there. I think a lot of single family homes. I think one interesting thing about Birmingham compared to some of these other markets is just like lower supply of like C-class multifamily. I mean, it definitely is out there, but Birmingham has a lot of single family homes. And that's what you're going to find in a lot of these areas. There's some pockets in there. A good starter point. There's some townhouses in Grayson Valley, and big rental community. It's a lot of kind of people feel comfortable. The purchase prices are probably in the 105 to 110s, and you can probably rent them for about $1,000 right now. That's kind of a good little community to look at. And one thing I mentioned was Center Point. We've kind of talked about it. Just one thing to know about Center Point is it's kind of its own city. And so if you Google and go to Google Maps and type city of Center Point, Alabama, you can kind of see where the line is. And they just have their own inspectors and their own kind of code department. And if it's a brand new house that's turnkey, you're probably not going to run into it. But what we've heard, and this hasn't necessarily changed, is if you're doing a big renovation, you've got to pull permits, and you're going to have city inspectors coming out and inspecting and making sure everything's done right. But they have a tendency to kind of find things that need to be upgraded. So just building in a big contingency if you're going to buy there, or buying turnkey is what a lot of investors are doing right now. And that might change. So reach out, kind of as you start to look there. I think there's a ton of good opportunities in there. It's just kind of want you guys to, as you're investing, just kind of be aware of that there is kind of some city lines to know where to invest and where to just kind of ask some more questions.
And is there anything else about CenterPoint like that's changed, I guess, over the past few years besides just inspections on rehabs? Like, are they requiring landlords to do anything extra?
I think that's kind of the biggest thing that they look out. I've heard talks about
they are requiring them to get a license,
sure.
Which there are some. That's one of the unique things about Birmingham is each municipality has its own rules, and so you take places like Tarrant or Centerpoint or Fairfield. There's certain requirements. That's not dissimilar to other markets. Chicago is very much like that.
Yeah,
Detroit is very much like that. But that's one of the reasons.
But it's not common here. It's not as common here in Birmingham.
Not as common, but you do have municipalities. Each municipality is going to have its own rules, and the government is not similar to a Nashville or like a Kansas City where it's more county based. This is more city based. So cities compete for businesses to come versus counties competing. So again, it just gets into real estate's a hyper local business. Finding a group that has boots on the ground that understands how the city works is incredibly important.
Yep.
Yeah. One other just kind of area we talk about Roebuck is kind of like closer to the city center. And you got South Roebuck, and then you got East Lake. And East Lake's an interesting area that over the past couple of years has seen some kind of development. So you're seeing people start to retail houses. And that's kind of divided by the interstate right there, 59. You get Northeast Lake, and then you got Southeast Lake kind of butts up the mountain near Ruffner Mountain. And so a lot of investors like that. You're seeing some of those kind of, 40s to 60s houses, but people are, flipping the houses. They're putting on the retail market. You're seeing some things kind of change there. And so I've seen rental rates, 5 years ago, 2-bedroom house was $650 to $700, and a 3-bedroom was $750 to $800. And now we're seeing those rental rates on the 3-bedrooms push into the, $1,050, $1,100, even $1,200, depending on the finish of the house. And you can still find houses that need a lot of repair there, but that's another area that kind of investors like to look at. And you're seeing some kind of movement from, some working professionals and kind of moving towards that area as like places like Avondale kind of develop. And so that's kind of on the tail end down there, and it kind of bleeds into South Roebuck. And so some good places to look, but it can still be street by street. And so I think there's kind of pockets that are really good to look at. And there's other pockets that might on a map look, like a really good deal or really good place, but it might be 5 streets away from kind of where development's happening. And so another kind of area to key in on.
Great. Are any clients buying in Gardendale? I've always thought Gardendale in terms of like distance from the city and, easeability and great school systems. I'm kind of surprised. We never bought more, back when we were like personally buying very heavily in some of these areas when Spencer and I were when Spencer was, big ball and homevestor. Do we have any clients that are currently buying in Gardendale?
We have some. I mean, it's just a smaller kind of inventory of homes, but like you said, the schools are really good. I think a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years, they built a brand new high school up there. And that's
it's got a lot of new product too. I mean, a lot of these houses were built in the 2000s.
Yeah, they have. I think that's a really good look. There's some townhome communities up there that investors have bought in. And then there's some newer inventory up there. So yeah, that's another good place to look. There's just less homes on the market. Like I'm kind of looking right now and there might be 10 or 12 up there. And so it just might be slimmer pickings, but that's another good area that's kind of north of the city. It's got great access. I mean, that's the thing.
It's so close.
It's closer. It's closer than Pelham. You don't have to deal with 65 traffic if you're coming into the city. And so, I mean, that could be a place that if the city kind of, continues to build up there. And it looks like there's some newer product being put up there. And so that might be something that you kind of look at as if you want to build the rent. And if you
that's
can buy
what
a
I
new
was
house
thinking
up
is
there.
like, man, what a great place to build for rent. I mean, here I am thinking out loud. I guess now we're going to compete with all our listeners for this build for rent community that's going up. Maybe we'll crowdsource it with our listeners right now.
That's right.
Do a build for rent up there.
That's right. All right. Any other C class that you would highlight? I know we've, Matthew. I know Matthew loves Forestdale.
Huge Forestdale.
He's a huge Forestdale fan.
A Forestdale, Adamsville fan. I've always said if I could only buy one rental house, it would probably be in Forestdale or Adamsville. And I don't know that I've always said that. Maybe that's the first time I've said it.
You just said it
now
for
that
the
I'm
first
thinking
time
about
today.
Now that I'm thinking about it. From now on, I'll always say it. But I'm a huge fan of that area.
Why are you a huge fan?
To me, it is. There's not as many homes over there, and there's people that I've invested. Spencer snaked me into buying my first house over there. Maybe it's just nostalgia, but you talk to people, and a lot of people have just lived over there on that side of town, gone to minor high school. It's just a community that I understood really well, and frankly love those houses there because they're. The vintage of the home is very similar to what you find in that kind of Center Point, Roebuck area, but it's just on the other side of town.
Yeah, and there's still a large degree of home ownership in that area too. I mean, it's not like completely a rental area.
Yeah, and probably more so than maybe the other areas that we just talked about. You might have a higher percentage over there. One thing about that area is there's more homes on septic. And some investors like that. Some investors don't. That's just kind of another unique thing of that kind of corridor over there that you got more septic homes opposed to city sewer.
Yeah. I used to just run the pipes out into the street. So I didn't deal with that problem.
I'm just not kidding. Investment advice right there.
I'm just kidding. If anybody's taking that seriously.
I think two honorable mentions here before we head on to kind of look at potentially some D class areas, Pleasant Grove and Hueytown, which are on the western side of town. Those are, I think those are fantastic areas to buy in. It's not a ton of rental houses, but to me, it's very similar to Forestdale. They're very similar to Forestdale.
Yeah. If I could only buy one rental home, it would be in Pleasant Grove. No, look, both of those, Pleasant Grove is its own city. Hueytown is its own city. Great school systems. The thing about them is they are further out. So they're kind of like west, kind of southwest. So it's a lot of access to Bessemer. That's down where the Amazon stuff is. That's also where the Mercedes-Benz plant is down that way. Kind of on the way to Tuscaloosa on 59 and 20 on the way to Tuscaloosa. It's probably a good 15 or 20 minute drive. So anybody that works at the plant could also live in those two areas.
All right, let's move on. We're going to finish up with some D class areas, and let's talk about that first. I mean, we don't want to scare people away from investing in D class. That's really how I cut my teeth in investing in Birmingham, is really buying in certain areas that were low to moderate income properties. You just need to know what you're doing, right? You need to, like Gray was talking about with Eastlake. Eastlake has some D class areas, or so it is really kind of block by block, street by street. But so anyway, so Gray, talk to us, give us your thoughts on some potentially good D class areas for investors.
Yeah, and I think it's a very subjective scale. So we are. This is kind of our opinion of what it is. You'll talk to different investors that think, differently, and I think there's different pockets. And it's kind of hard to paint like, hey, this whole zip code is this,
right? Yeah.
And So I think we kind of talk about the west side of town. Like Spencer said, these are going to be older vintage homes. They're closer to the city center. So you've got more 1920s houses, 1930s houses. And so be prepared for more maintenance. Just really get a thorough inspection. It's different than buying a B-class house with things you're going to find in the inspection. So just kind of being prepared for that, having the right contacts of contractors, et cetera, when you're buying houses over here. I think what attracts people is you see the price of the house and you see the return on paper, what you can get. Yeah. For example, I mean, you can buy houses. We sold 2 houses to an investor that were $45,000 and $55,000, and they were renting on Section 8 HUD, and they were $900 and $850 a month rent. And shoot, that's 2% roll, and those are really good numbers.
Sure.
You just got to build in, money for reserves, money for repairs. And I think you also, and I'm kind of talking just high level before we get into the area, is just that plus vacancy, and typically D-class relates to just kind of higher vacancy, potentially higher delinquency, and higher crime. But kind of talking about Birmingham, the west side of town is typically kind of probably the lowest end. You'll see the lowest purchase prices over there. I think some interesting things going on, hearing about stuff in Inslee. And so there's kind of 2 sides of Inslee, north of the interstate and south. And there's some good blocks in there where you can buy rental homes, a 3-bed, 2-bath, and the 70 to 90 range, and it'll rent for $850 to $900. And I think you can certainly go, even kind of over in like Arlington West End and get a little bit lower purchase price, but you got to be careful over there. There could be a burnout. I mean, there's still houses where it's not worth the cost to like redevelop a house. And so if a house burns, it might not get rebuilt. And so, yeah, overall,
if you pull up the map, you'll see West End, and it's right next to Arlington West End. Those are the areas near Pearson Avenue, Tuscaloosa Avenue, Jefferson Avenue. You really need to know what you're doing when you're buying over there.
Birmingham's actually investing some money, I know, into downtown Inslee, which used to be kind of a really hot spot, kind of in early Birmingham.
Yeah,
it's got a cool downtown area. And I've heard of some companies that are moving over there, and they're trying to kind of really put some money back into it and revitalize it. And there's some cool programs with, teaching, I think kids from the local high school and teaching them the trades and to renovate houses. And so it's cool to hear those things happening in Inslee. You also hear talk about the World Games that's coming to Birmingham. So there's a new stadium built on the north side of town. And so I've heard that from a lot of investors, and their thesis of buying here is that they think that's going to help kind of, put a lot of money into the area. So I think the pockets, and one interesting is kind of over like Bush Hills area. 5 or 6 years ago, there were houses sold for $50,000, $60,000. And I've seen houses go, and you've got professionals moving in there selling at 160, 170, and like a nice product house. And there's some really cool, like old historic houses over there. I sold a multifamily building over there. It was a 4-unit. And so you've got like a mix of some kind of multifamily, and duplexes and some single family. So if you're looking for multifamily, you're probably going to see it in this area.
They're older though, right? They're older multifamily. They're good looking brick multifamily.
I think this one was 1900. And so it had a lot of work put into it though. And it had 4 units, and they were getting between $800 rent. So it's a good area. I mean, I think you just, know and buying the right house, making sure it's had work done to it. But there's investors who are really successful with this. And so there's a lot of investors that, they get attracted to the purchase price. And I think understandably so. I mean, those are great returns right now. They're tough to get in other areas.
Spencer, you and I have some good friends. I know one guy, I'm thinking of one guy who's built a whole, probably 80 to 100 house portfolio over in Inslee. And I think he just recently sold it to an institution, but, but 2 guys that I'm thinking of right off the bat. I mean, the West Side's where they love to be, anywhere from West End to Inslee. I mean, that was kind of their stomping grounds.
They know really every street. They know almost every house. Like they know everything about these areas.
Yeah. And so there's some really smart people that we know that are investing their money over there. And so, I mean, again, I like Inslee a lot. And they're like Gray was saying, there's some really great areas. I forget exactly what the area is called, but like 44th Street, 43rd Street. We bought a bunch of houses up there in the past.
I've actually going a little bit further west. I've owned some houses in some good pockets of Midfield that I really like.
Oh yeah.
That I would even consider probably C-class. Like this area suit a lot of home ownership, pride of ownership in the neighborhood. My house was on Midwood Road. One of them was that I absolutely loved.
Yep.
It was just a great place. I was like, man, this is a little gym inside of midfield. So again, there's pockets in all these areas, even in, West End and all over.
Yeah. There's Fairfield midfield has some really kind of nice houses. It's a little bit further out, just from kind of the city center. And a lot of investors key in on there. And there's some great houses that are definitely C classes. I think that's what we kind of talk about. You can't paint it with a broad brush over there. But yeah, pretty efficient homes. I mean, some of these will have the 10-foot ceiling. Some of these might even have higher, just kind of watching out for that. And then making sure, structural issues. Cause if it's an older home, just what does that look like? So really get a thorough inspection on here and just kind of know what it's going to cost. But even a lot of times with fixing some of these older issues, you can still put a tenant in there. There's going to be a lot more Section 8 government subsidy tenants who are looking over here. And so that's probably more of the tenant demographic that you're going to find in a lot of these West End areas.
Well, let me ask you this. Well, go ahead, Matthew.
I was just going to say, this just brings to mind the fact that when somebody's getting started, like if you were buying in Birmingham, or again, whether you're buying in, Columbus, or wherever you're buying, it gets back to the fact of find an area that you like, maybe come to Birmingham, ride around Birmingham, find an area you like, or go to Jackson, or we've talked about a lot of markets on here, but find a specific area like a Midfield or a Roebuck or whatever, and just become an expert about that area. And that way, when a house comes, it's really easy for you to jump on that house. And so we've kind of thrown out a lot of areas, but I think it's really important that people kind of zoom in on an area and become an expert at that area, especially if they're just getting started.
Yeah. And we're giving a lot of high level information, but kind of throwing out some of these names. And I'd recommend you to write them down and then go to Google Maps and just kind of look at the areas, pull up Zillow, see what houses are renting for, see what the product looks like, go on Google Street View, and kind of, I think that's how you can remotely start to understand the market. And, some of the places in Eastlake, it's got 2019 Google images and some of them have 2010. So the bottom right corner, make sure you know what year you're looking at, because things have changed rapidly over the past 10 years. And I think that's why investors like the market. I think there's change happening. There's jobs moving into the market. And so I think holistically, I think there's a lot of positives for why Birmingham ends up on a lot of these top 5 places to invest lists.
Well, guys, this has been great. Any other thoughts, about Birmingham?
No, we could talk about Birmingham all day.
We could keep talking about it. Good. All right, everybody. Thank y'all for being here, for listening. I do want to make one announcement, that listen, we are growing. We're expanding. I'm talking about Evernest. We have a brokerage department, a property management department. If you're interested at all thinking about joining our team, I want to ask you, visit our website, evernest.co. We have a careers page. We have a lot of information there where you can find out what it's like to work here at Evernest. We'd love to see you come through the pipe. Are you going to say anything?
Totally agree. I think some of our best team members are people that are interested in investing, interested in learning about property management, interested in being a broker and helping investors find houses. And so, if you're out there and you're listening and you're like, wow, I could just immerse myself into this whole industry, we would love for that to be a part of your career, and we can help you invest on the side. We have a lot of people that are buying houses on the side. In fact, we have a maintenance tech that was in here yesterday asking questions about his rental houses and how to buy another rental house. So we actually help team members do that, and would love for somebody else to join our team and do that as well.
And we're not talking about just Birmingham. We're talking all over the country and all of our markets. We have plenty of team members that also work remotely. So visit the website and learn more. And also, if you're not going to work for us, at least you can leave us a 5-star review, right? So go on there. If you've enjoyed this episode, if you've enjoyed any of our other episodes, leave us a review. And we'll be back next week with another episode of the Evernest Real Estate Investor Podcast.